Hello and welcome to the lovely River Wye in Hereford. And this, our seventh, I can't believe it Dave, seventh review.
Seventh heaven, Tom.
Seventh heaven, well this is seventh heaven to me. Oh, it's Wye heaven actually, isn't it? But
well, it is, but it's
something like that.
Certainly aided by the weather today.
It's late February, the sun's shining, the river has been up over the last few days Dave, but it's dropping now.
It was actually only 5 days ago it was over the banks. And yet here we are, we've got about 2 metres of extra water on, and well, I think we're going to catch some fish, aren't we? We've made a good start.
What you've just seen there, folks, is actually the first fish of the day. Just bowled in some ground bait, and we've got a very, very nice, neat review, I'm going to call it today, because we've got 3 products that all complement each other absolutely beautifully.
You could even say, I think, Tom, that this review today is going to flow.
Oh, just like the river.
Did you see what I did there?
I did. Oh, look at that.
I missed that one, look at that.
How you missed that?
I don't know, Tom. Everybody's fallible. Even the greatest.
We've got the Colmic Emperia Bolo rod. That's a 6 metre version right there, coming 5 to 7 metres. We're going to cover that first. We've got the Cadence CP200 whip system, which we're going to look at in a couple of different lengths, and some ground bait that somebody tells me you've been instrumental in developing, Dave.
Instrumental might be overplaying my part slightly, however I was consulted and had some involvement, I would say, in its department. So it's kind of a bit of a, I suppose, a bit of a conflict of of interest on this, isn't it? We're supposed to be very independent, so I think you're going to have the deciding vote on that one. Yeah,
that's the Bait Tech Pro Natural range. It's a ground bait I've never used. I know obviously Dave does really, really well on it, and I know Dave Howell and 1 or 2 other anglers who do good. So it'll be interesting today to see what we think of it. I've already had a little mix-up of it, but we'll tell you a bit more about that later. But first, oh, Dave.
That was a bite, wasn't it?
First, the Bolo rod, Dave. Before I go into this specific product, I just want to ask a little bit about bolognese fishing, really, because it's something I've not done a lot of, as you'll probably see later when I pick the rod up. I've done a bit of it, and I like to think, I know what makes decent tackle for it. And the key to me for it is that it's easy to use and simple. And I know that's something that you're really big on yourself. But first, let me just ask you, when would you fish a bolo, and why would you fish a bolo?
Okay, so I suppose the first and main point is the extra length of the longer rod gives you more line control, simple as that. And we've all been using longer rods, sort of 15, 17, even 20-foot rods for quite a few years now, and obviously that gives you greater line control, downstream winds, that sort of thing. And also venues like this that are deep. This is what we're fishing now. We've probably got 13 foot of water there that we're fishing today. So a 13-foot rod would be very awkward, despite the fact that for a lot of years that's all we used.
Yeah.
So what's happened is there's been sort of this evolution of in this country of more bolo rods coming in, and I'll be honest, bolo rods have only come into my sort of armoury, if you like, in the last few years. I know a few guys have been using them for a long time, but I always got away with using longer rods, and I was quite happy with that. But I have to say, what the bolo rods are doing now, they're giving you, they're so well made, and this one appears to be in that bracket as well. They're light, they're very usable, and almost like venues like this where we catch a lot of fish on short pole, on whip to hand, it's almost like an extension of that. It's giving you, today is a perfect example. In fact, we couldn't have picked a better day for the products that we're doing today, and the fact that you've got to have an element of control in what you're doing. And on some days, the flow is just so much that, a whip is fine. You can get a heavy enough float to hold it, but you've got such a short run through that you're reaching down your peg. And with this, in effect, what you're achieving is the same presentation, but you're allowing it to run.
Yeah.
And you're using more of your peg, because obviously these fish aren't just sat on top of your ground bait, they're sat down the peg, on the loose feed that's coming off them. As you can see, the dace are, we're catching dace, and that was down the peg.
Yeah.
So I think the bolo rods, have just helped, sort of, it's almost like a halfway house between fishing whip and fishing a long rod. It's just very usable, and there's nothing to stop us if you wanted to. Just you could almost use it as a whip. You can sort of, most of the time you could be catching there in front of you, using it as such, hardly using the reel. But then when you do get that, when it goes just out of reach, you can just open your bail arm and let it run. You know, it gives you that variation, I think.
Almost an extension of the arm there to you, that, isn't it? I'd say.
Yeah,
So,
that's the sort of idea. So, but you know, the big thing. Let's be fair. This is not a new concept. You know, the Italians and the European have been using bolognese for years, and you know, and a lot of it as well. You know, and that's why a lot of the bolognese products, such as this from Colmic, is coming out of Italy. You know, they're you know, they're a bit they're ahead of the game on us on that sort of thing.
I mean, let's address the elephant in the room first. And I always think the elephant in the room with this sort of product is it's going to be difficult to fish with for a full day, surely. I mean, holding, I mean, a pole's obviously different, a whip's different. You fish it under your arm, you rest it on your legs often. But this, it's something you're going to be sort of holding on your forearm all day. So, usability-wise, what do you think?
Absolutely, I don't see it as an issue, to be honest. For me, this is probably easier than using a whip. You know, we're using a 7-metre whip. I've got a 6-metre bolo rod, as opposed to using a 6-metre whip.
Oh, that was nice. Right under the bait, that one.
So that was right on the bait, that one. A bit bigger as well. So for me, it's not an issue. Nice big dace, that, isn't it?
I love the fish, aren't
and I suppose it's something I'm used to doing as well.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous, that one. I suppose if you weren't used to it, and I have had it myself, you know, where you use a bolo rod for the first time in the autumn or whatever. Haven't used it since the previous spring.
Yeah.
You know, you go home and you've got like, muscles aching where you didn't realise you had muscles, you know, and things like that.
Might surprise you, Dave, but I've never had trouble with the right arm. It's always been sort of a strong area for me. That particular part of the body.
I didn't know that, but I kind of guessed it. You look that sort of person.
I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or not. Probably not, actually.
No, don't.
Yeah, it looks usable. It looks very stiff, very responsive. And I think another big thing, in my experience with this type of product, is obviously the action of the rod. And it's a really difficult thing to get right because you're striking through big floats, a lot of lead, a lot of balsa, in essence, but it's still got to be soft enough to not rip the hook out of fish like dace and roach.
And with this, I think that's the key. You know, they can be a little bit specialist tools, and there are variations. It's not just one rod fits all. It's different rods for different things. So if you were just fishing for predominantly roach, long distance, small roach or something, you might need a softer bolo rod. You know, and that's where perhaps at the moment in this country we're not quite on our game in the fact that if you want a pellet waggler rod, say. But you want to, but you fish F1 venues for smaller fish or big reservoirs for, there's a whole array. In this country so far, we seem to be bringing in a bolo rod, without the sort of grades because they are still quite a specialist tool, and companies don't tend to bring in a big range of bolo rods. Whereas if you went to Italy, I keep banging on about Italy, don't know. I'm not obsessed by Italy, honestly, but it is where this sort of, there would just be such a range of bolo rods from every action, every length, just loads of it. So I think that's where we only see a microcosm of what's available.
I think you're right. I think there's two sides to that though. In that I think it does give your we'll call them UK managers or UK reps or whatever you want to call them, the freedom to look through that range and actually bring in the products that suit UK fishing.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Sean Stockley and hey, what's this?
Tom, don't get excited. It's a
bleak.
Yes. It's a bleak. Look at that.
Get in.
Hey, you're all excited by that.
Now you're talking.
You'd be running up to set the waggler rod up now, wouldn't you?
But yeah, it gives them the chance to look through this vast range of products and decide what is the most relevant for UK rivers. And watching you fish with this rod, I can't see how you'd really do it any better with any other way of fishing. For example, a pole wouldn't be as good at this, would it? Or no. a big stick. It's absolutely invaluable for this sort of fishing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think and going back to the point about sort of the weight of them and usability, you see the way I'm fishing, I've just got it resting on my knee, really. Yes, all right, comfort. It's easier. If I was stood up holding it all day, it might be a bit less comfortable. But same as if you're a pole fishing.
And let's face it, you're not a young man anymore, Dave, and you're making that look quite light and easy. So
I belie my age, don't I, Tom?
Well, something. I mean, you try your best to hide it by wearing shades and a baseball cap. But,
Tom,
you know.
Tom, that's to do with me age. I need to protect my eyes. It's a bright day, but no. Listen. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this way of fishing. You know, it's not about speed fishing. It's not about necessarily about presentation. It's about giving yourself, you know, being able to run that float through and get a bite every cast.
Yeah.
That's the key, isn't it? That's what you're trying to do is put fish together in match fishing terms or pleasure fishing terms. You just want a bite. Give yourself a chance, a bite of every rundown. So you know, with the right, you know, as we said, this is all sort of these all interlinked today, and with the right ground bait, you know, the right rig and the right equipment, you can achieve that. And this is just a very, especially on a bigger river like this, is good. And now the other side to it as well, of course, is we do a lot of fishing when the river levels drop on this river. We fish the middle of the river. You know, we always say make the middle of the river your own. You know, thing, and it's really, you know, that's when these long rods really are a great thing. You know, you can sort of get your big float out there, get your ground bait behind it, and then just, you know, you literally. I think what the Bolo rod does as well, it cuts down the amount of time, amount of line, amount of use of a reel, if I'm honest. Yeah. Because, you know, if I'm fishing a shorter rod, then it's, you know, I'm having to use the reel a lot more, let a lot more line out, wind a lot more line in. Whereas this, it's actually, you know, a lift of the rod. You know, if I'm fishing in the middle of the river or whatever, you know, just you know, after I've sort of meant everything, a lift of the rod, and I'm behind the float. I don't need to do anything with the reel. It's a very
it's control. It gives you control, doesn't it? Control and presentation you couldn't get in any other way. That's how I'd sum it up. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the key to catching fish. You know, success on moving water, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just so we're keeping everyone, so everyone understands what we're doing here today. So what we're doing, we've got the ground bait. You know, what we're doing at the moment is we're in the early stages. We've put some ground bait in. Another bleak for you there, Tom.
Lovely.
We've put some ground bait in, and we're trying to catch over that ground bait. And there's two processes. And the reason I'm going through this is because I want you to have a go. I do this all the time. I don't, you know, I love.
Believe me, Dave. I will not put any
promise you.
Whatsoever.
I promise you, I'm not hogging the rod today. But what I'm sort of trying to get is just get you through how I'm looking at this. So I've put ground bait in, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. But I put ground bait in. I know whereabouts that ground bait's landing. Now what I'm trying to do is get my rig working properly over top of it, so I can get the fish, you know, so I can get fish regularly in one area of my peg, you know, one area of the peg.
Yeah.
Now, the only way to achieve that, there's two components that are going to achieve that, and that's the right rig and the right bait.
Yeah.
And the two have got to interlink. If they don't, if the rig's too light or too heavy, it doesn't work. If the ground bait's too soft or too light or too fluffy or breaking down or not going where you want it to, you lose control. So those two elements are just the absolute key.
Old maxims, isn't it? Feed and presentation.
Yeah, that's all you're looking for. And if you can get the two married up together, it doesn't matter whether you're fishing a pole, bolo, stick float, whatever. If you get those two together, you've got success.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to have one more run through. I'm going to have one more fish, and then I'm handing you the rod.
Right, and I'm going to pick your brains when I get hold of it as to exactly what you've set up, because as I said, I've done a little bit of this fishing, and it's been interesting because my bolo and whip fishing, for that matter, I came to after having, you know, reasonable success in other areas like pole fishing and waggler fishing, feeder fishing, etc. I felt I'd got the hang of them, and then it was about 3 years ago when the dace moved into Shrewsbury, and I thought, right, let's have a go at this. And I picked your brains quite a lot, I remember, and Darren Frost at the time as well, and I've really enjoyed it. And although, you know, it was something that always daunted me a little bit, really, because of, you have the impression, you look at the rod, it's a daunting piece of kit, the setup, the great big floats, you think this is quite a technical way of fishing, quite a technical kind of fishing. But when you get into it, you realise, as you said there, Dave, it's those simple maxims of feed and presentation, which are the same with everything. But also, when it comes to tackle and setup, the simpler you can keep things, the more straightforward you can keep things, the less tangles you get. And I mean, you haven't had a tangle once yet, and you've caught, you know, 6 fish now, 7 fish.
And the other thing as well is ultimately these, you know, these are not fish. You've got 2 meters of extra water, you know, over 6 foot of extra water on here today. You know, is a fish really looking, inspecting your hook, inspecting the fall of, No, the reality is they are coming to that ground bait, and all I need to do is get my hook bait somewhere near that ground bait where that's landing, where those fish are congregating,
Yeah.
to give them, and then, you know, have a rig big enough to get, just to slow it down enough to give them chance to get hold of it.
Yes.
And that's it. There's no finesse need, you know, finesse is, not necessarily finesse is the right word, but there's no great secret to it or any, you know, it's literally.
That was me, wasn't it? I said.
You said I
you haven't had a
tangle.
tangle all day, and there you are, folks.
I did pull out of a fish though, so it's kind of understandable.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, that's yeah. So it's not. It's like I say, it's making sure those components are right, and it doesn't have to be complicated, and it's not about, you know, fancy rigs. In this case, it's about a rig that's effective and getting your bait down to where you want it to go. It's a lot about, like I talk about, you know, when I'm guiding on the river and stuff. Talk about hot spots a lot.
Yeah.
You know, you have that hot spot in your swim. So, you know, I might put that ball of ground bait in now, and I've got a fair idea of where that's dropping on the bottom, you know, straight away, because I've done it so many times, and I know where I'd expect to be getting bites.
Yeah.
But someone, but it's never the same 2 days running.
Yeah.
So that spot might be, you know, 3 or 4 meters down the peg that
Yeah.
I want to. So then I can adjust where I'm putting my bait in. But it's all about finding that hot spot in your peg. Where's this one spot where it's going to go under every time, and you're going to catch a fish from?
Something that I think is absolutely key as well, like, and it's a lesson that's stood me in brilliant stead with this, not just for this kind of fishing, but any kind of river fishing. And you know, today's an extreme example. We've got a lot of water on, a lot of flow on. Notice how Dave's still feeding his bait well down the peg, and that I think's important, isn't it, Dave? Because it allows you to control how your rig goes. So you see a lot of people feeding bait in front of them, and
Yeah.
I always wonder why, because you've got no way of actually controlling how your rig goes through that bait, you know.
No. And you could miss bite. You know, you could miss fish. The fish could be sat right on top of where that ground bait's landing.
Yeah.
On the bottom, and if your bait isn't down far, you know, quick enough, you know, if your rig isn't settling until 2 or 3 meters below it, you might still get bites, but you won't have those quick, regular bites.
We have this idea, don't we, as well, that, you know, the fish are sat where the ground bait's landing, which is all well and good. But how many times have you had it in the past where actually they seem to be sat where your ground bait hits the water, which makes no sense whatsoever, but that's how it seems to be.
And another key thing, certainly on this river, and I'm not saying this isn't the key on a lot of rivers, but fishing like this with so much extra water, where I want my bulk to get down and I want my hook bait to be almost scraping the bottom over top of the ground bait. Key for me is casting that bulk upstream like that and laying the float downstream, and then I know that's sinking straight down, and I know that bulk has taken my bait somewhere near the bottom now, and then when it gets over to the area where I feel like my ground bait is, I can just check the float and just slow it, and now I feel like I'm in my hot spot.
Yeah.
And I know my bait is scraping the bottom or somewhere close to it, and it's in the zone, you know, so you're making sure it's going through in the right place.
Oh, that was a nice bite, wasn't it?
It was almost a perfect demonstration, but that's what I'm looking, you know, that's another thing I think people get wrong, is they don't get their bait down quick enough.
No.
You know, and like you say, your ball of ground bait's landing there somewhere, and by the time their rig's fishing, they're sort of 3 or 4 meters below it, and you know, trying to I suppose that's the key of any fishing, but certainly with river fishing, it's understanding where your bait is and where your hook bait is.
Oof. That
was a bite right on top of the bait. So that was where I would expect those balls of ground bait to be landing, you know, so I'd imagine fish to be coming straight into it. And then you'd perhaps have a run of maybe 3 or 4 meters below that, which I would call your hot spot.
Yes.
And anything below that, I'm almost like feeling, once it goes past that, I'm almost feeling, well, I might as well wind it in and go back again and get back over my bait.
Yeah,
Because although I might get a bite right down the peg, it's not where I want to be getting bites. I want to be getting bites right over my feet.
Different kind of fishing, but I remember at Evesham, Sam Wildsmith always used to say, wear a groove in the river, wear a groove with a bloodworm, you know.
Yeah.
Same with a lot of river fishing, isn't it? It's just finding that sweet spot, as Rory would call it. Our mate Rory Jones, on a sweet spot.
The sweet spot. He's got some sayings, hasn't he?
So this must mean it's my go, I think.
It is, my friend. So I've set it up for you. You cannot fail. Now I want to talk to you about the sort of more of the components of this rod. You know, we've talked about what Bolo rods achieve, but let's look at this rod in particular. Well, there you go, Tom. That didn't take you long, did it?
No, I tell you what, Dave.
You're quite a quick learner, aren't you?
I won't go that far. Ask my teachers.
But it's not. I mean, it's like, yeah, I know you were saying you've done this sort of fishing, but it's different to what you've done. But
Yeah, very different.
The mechanics are the same, aren't they? Ultimately, you're fishing with a bulk rig. You're getting your bait down. It's in amongst your bait where you're feeding.
Yeah.
And that gives you a chance of a bite, and you know, it's how you go about it from there, isn't it? It's not rocket science.
No, it's not. But it's like everything, isn't it? The more practice you are at it, the easier you'll find it. And as I said, I mean, one of the key things I've always felt as someone trying to learn this sort of fishing is, you know, it's about keeping everything as simple as possible, isn't it? And I can see that this sort of setup you've got here is ultra simple. We've got a bulk, haven't we?
Yeah.
I've shot. It's a bit further out, Dave. I'll get told off about that one. Let it come in a bit
I wouldn't
further.
tell you off, Tom. I'll just point you. I'll just direct you.
Oh, there we are. I think that's not a million miles.
That's it. So
But yeah, it's simplicity, isn't it? That's absolutely key.
I think the thing to remember with bolo fishing as well, or fishing bolo floats, is to remember no matter what you do or where you go and do it or what species you're fishing for, if they're finicky little roach or aggressive dace or whatever, it's a bulk rig.
Yes.
It's a positive rig. You know, so if you translate that to your pole fishing, if you were fishing, say, the Warwickshire Avon and you've got a couple of rigs set up on the bank, you're going to have a bulk rig, which is going to be your positive rig.
Yeah.
You'll have a strung out rig, which is your, you know, your hemp rig, or, you know,
Absolutely.
the presentation rig, if you like. So, you know, yes, presentation is very important, but the reality is you're fishing a very positive method. No matter what fish and what venue you're fishing for, it's a positive rig. When a fish takes that bait, the bulk is going to mean you get a bite. You know, a positive bite. And it's about, you know, adjusting things accordingly, isn't it?
Absolutely. Getting it going down the same hole every time. And you can see how, you know, time spent doing this would, like anything, as I said earlier, would be rewarded. I'm right under the old rod tip, isn't it?
Oh, you've got a bleak.
Hey,
Doesn't take you long,
you
does
won't
it?
fail,
It doesn't take you long, does it?
All right, so let me ask you, Dave. You've done a lot of bolo fishing. Oh, I hope that one's gone back as well. I didn't put it in the net, that one, for you.
No, it's good.
What do you like about this? What don't you like?
About the rod?
Yeah.
The first thing that struck me about it was the eyes. The eyes are they're very slim eyes on it. You know, they're not very, you know, they don't stand out much, which I can only assume helps with the balance of the rod or the weight of the rod. I don't know what the thinking is behind that, but there are slimmer ringers I've seen on a rod.
Yeah.
Of any rod, you know. I'm used to these sort of Fuji eyes and stuff like that, which have got an inner ring. And they seem to be of a metal. I'm sure there's some technical information on what they are, but they seem, so that seems to just sort of blend into the rod. I think it's, you know, it is important to remember that these are ultimately, you know, they're whips with a reel seat on, aren't they? And rings, you know, that's what they started off life as.
Yeah.
Yeah, put them together now, ain't you, Tom? No bleak this time.
It's like a larger sample, Dave, actually. It's a dace.
It's a dace.
Simply lovely.
See, that dace could be smaller than a bleak, and I'd still rather catch it than a bleak.
That's a bloody specimen at Evesham, that. You net that at Evesham.
You probably would. Yeah. So no, I think that's, you know, that's the important thing to remember is how you achieve a running line, a model that allows you to you know, to get a decent running line and to react to the different you know, the different movements of fishing. You know, striking a bolo at distance is a lot different to striking a pole float on a whip, isn't it? So,
yes.
You know, there's actually a lot of good thinking behind the way these whips are made. But I like those rings. I like the action of the rod. Looks good, doesn't it?
I think it's lovely. I really do. It's as I said, to me, it's that balance between the sort of power you need to strike through the floats that you're using, but also the softness that you don't bump off what you hook, and it's a joy to use, isn't it? I mean, I know I've got to admit, folks, I'm a bit blown away by the whole experience. It's just lovely fishing this. It's, I said to Dave before we came on camera, just that I'm moving to Hereford, me. I mean, this is fish porn of the highest order, isn't it? I mean, oh, Dave.
I'll put it to the immigration committee as to whether you're allowed in or not.
Look at this. This is a large dace.
So I'm having a good look at this action of this rod now. So you've got, yeah, it's soft through the top there, but it's giving you, I think, you certainly on this river, the key is being able to do exactly what you just did. Swing that fish up, get it in, get it up. You know, because a lot of this is, like I say, you're pulling that fish up off the bottom, you know, you've got to get them up off the bottom for a couple of reasons on this river. One, the flow, and you want to get them out quickly. But the other thing is, there's probably a 20-pound pike sat behind it or something like that. You've got to be able to
get it in and get it up, which I've always had trouble with, Dave, to be honest.
so I've been told. But yeah, it's kind of that's what you're looking for. So first thing, I'd be interested to see how, you know, I'd like us to catch some roach at some point on it, and just see how it's like on them sort of softer mouthed roach. It looks, to me, it looks a rod that's ideal for this river. Now I'd wonder now if I was fishing maybe parts of the upper Severn where you're fishing a bit more refined roach fishing, you know, smaller hooks. You know, whether it would work as well on that, or, you know, whether you need a softer action for that. That would be my initial thoughts. But for what we're doing today, I can't see the action looks perfect.
It's horses for courses as well, isn't it? I mean, this is a 6-metre version of the rod.
Did you nearly swear then, Dom? You're that excited, you nearly swore on camera.
It's just absolute fish porn.
That's a proper dace.
Come here. Yeah, it's lovely fishing.
But you see, the key for me, I suppose, is from a fishing point of view now, is you've now got those fish in an area of the peg where, you know, the float's going under, where I reckon we're almost narrowing it down to about a 2-metre run now.
These hooks, Dave, they go in, don't they?
They do. Do you want one of them?
Would you recommend something in the lip? Bloody hell, it's like, come here. It's in the lip, Dave. Shouldn't need one of them. It's a great barb on it, to be fair to you. Just talk me through the setup, because obviously there's a few things here. I was very impressed that you caught 8 fish without a tangle. I've sat down and caught 4 or 5 fish without a tangle, which I'd say means the setup's even more infallible. So it really is key, isn't it, with this sort of fishing? Just talk us through what you've got on there and why.
Before you cast out then, while we're on that same point, the biggest part I find with tangles with bolos is where your droppers are in relation to your bulk.
Yeah.
Now some venues you'll go to where you want a slow fall, where it is finesse fishing, and you need like a string of shots, and they're the hardest rigs to keep out of tangles. What I find the key is here is that there's 2 number 8s there, right? And those are probably, if you split the distance between the bulk and the hook, if you split that into thirds, it's on 1/3. If it was on 2/3, you'd be getting tangles.
Got you.
It's that weight balance. It's the you know thing. So even if sometimes you end up fishing more over depth, you know, you basically want those 2 droppers scraping the bottom almost.
Got you.
And that keeps you out of tangle. You know, I could cast that to the middle of the river and still get relatively few tangles. And that's what I've found over the years, is that's the reason why you get tangles. Another thing that's coming, you know, more into bolo fishing and people use more of is they have a swivel to attach it where they attach a hook link, like have it as a bottom dropper.
Yeah.
And that's something a few years ago, 2 years ago it was actually, I thought, well, everyone's doing this now and I've never done it. I think everyone's doing this, I should be doing this. And I set up all my rigs before the start of the season with swivels on. And it took me, I think, 1 or 2 matches to realise it just didn't suit me.
Yeah.
Whatever I was doing, it just wasn't suiting the way I fish or the way I shot my rigs or anything like that. So I stopped it. But I would say the majority of people I fish with now fish with a swivel down, you know. But I find that can add to the tangle effect as well if you're not careful. But those are important keys. So that's your bottom end, if you like. That bulk is, you know, the bulk is controlling everything. Everything that you know, the bigger the bulk. See, that's right in the zone now, isn't it? You're not
in the zone, Dave. Oh, it's come off. That was you. That was your fault, that, Dave.
It's So that bulk is controlling what your hook bait's doing ultimately. It doesn't matter what the float's doing.
Yeah.
In some ways, you're not worried about, you know, the fish aren't feeling the extra. You know, if you had an inch of float sticking out of the water, in this instance, the fish aren't going to grab the hook and go, oh, there's too much buoyancy in that float, and spit it out. No. By the time you whatever, with that sort of weight float, bear in mind that's a 10-gram bolo we've got on there today because of the extra water. You know, but by the time they've picked that bait and they feel that bulk, you're going to get a reaction on your float. You know, whether it might not go straight under, but it'll be a reaction, and you know, so it's not about the finesse isn't at that end, or sorry, that you know that you don't need finesse at that end. You just need a bulk that's getting your bait down, and you can pretty much read bites without the float ever going under.
No, it's makes total sense, and I've got to say, it's just a sublime way of fishing.
there's not many, in all fairness, and I know a bloke, you know, this is where I live, you know, in a bloke, but there's not many rivers you'd go to with 2 meters of extra water on, is there? And catch like this.
No, and it's a bit rusty there, Dave.
Slow on the old strike there.
You've got to let them have it. I'm going the old chops. What an awesome.
But I love this. I get this a lot. I love people getting their sort of. I know this isn't your first taste of this, but it almost is. The way you're talking, it's like it is, and
it's probably 4 years since I did this at Shrewsbury, and that was more whip fishing than this. I did a bit of this, and then it was on the whip, and the whip's, you know, a lot easier to master, I'd say, because it's a lot closer to you, a lot more direct, isn't it? But
it's all about control, though, isn't it? But whatever you're doing, whether you're fishing in the middle of the river, off your rod tip, on a pole, whatever, in this sort of venue where you've got this extra water on, you've got to be, everything's got to be controlled. Say your rig and your ground bait working in tandem, and you having ultimately control. If you put a float that's 2 gram lighter on there, you haven't got the same control. If you put a ground bait mix that's fluffier than that, or you know, it's you haven't got the same control.
I think maybe we should look at ground bait next. My question to you is, do you want to carry on fishing the Bolo, or is it time to line a few up on the whip before we have a chat about ground bait?
I mean, it's on whatever you're happiest with. You're enjoying yourself, so I'm happy to go along with whatever you like.
I'm loving life, but I'm just conscious that the viewers might rather watch you on the box than me, because you are rather good at this. So
I wouldn't agree.
I'm going to catch one more.
And you've made it a decent one as well.
And then we'll let you get back on the box, and we'll have a natter about the Bait Tech ground baits.
Okay.
Come here. Oh, Dave. Fishing heaven, that, isn't it?
It's pretty good.
Absolutely brilliant. So Dave, we're going to evolve the session now from a bit of Bolo fishing into a little bit of whip fishing. And never being a man to do things by halves, it's not going to be a case of simply flirting the odd little ball a bit closer, is it?
Well, no, I think what the main thing is with what we're trying to show here today, and why this sort of all flows into one, is we've gone through the session where we've caught on the Bolo and we nailed those fish in a real nice little area. Importantly, and this is a subject that creates a lot of confusion, is we didn't have soil in our ground bait. We just mixed it as it was because those mixes are right for this sort of water. Now we do use soil on here, a lot of people, you know, a lot of the time. But for me, it's not it's not always involved. And I think we proved that we can hold fish in an area of the peg without soil. But now we're going to switch to the whip, and what we're going to try and show here is how you can maneuver fish into position.
Yeah.
You're manipulating those fish. I'm not a manipulative type.
Very manipulative guy.
But we're not
verging on the narcissist, folks.
Virgin's out of this. All right. So anyway, so we're going to get this. So we're going to now try and maneuver those fish into position on our whip line. So that requires us sort of changing the way, where and how we're feeding. So what I've done is I've knocked up some ground bait now with some soil in.
Yeah.
And we're going to, we're going to introduce it the same, but we're going to introduce it higher up the peg.
Yeah.
And what the soil does, that's the question, is what does soil do to a ground bait? So it adds weight, it also helps the breakdown, but with adding that weight, what it does is it gives me a much tighter control. So imagine with whip fishing, as opposed to the Bolo, we've got a very short run, especially on this type of water. We're going to be going through 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got to come
5 seconds max, really.
Yeah, so we've got to pin where we're getting our bites. It's no good expecting bites down there because we'll never get there.
Yeah.
So that's why I've added the soil and added some weights to the mix. And what I'll do at this stage is just re-ball it, not with loads of balls. I don't do that. I mean, at the start, we only put sort of 5 balls in at the start. Yeah. That's a common thing on this river. I never understand why people hear about the river and they go, oh, you need loads of ground baits and whatever. And then I see people like balling in 15 balls at the start.
Yeah.
Why? The idea is that you're getting the fish coming to your ground bait and, a ball of chuck, if you like. So putting 15 in at the start is just a waste of ground bait.
Yeah.
Put 5 in, get a bite, and then put another one in, and that's how I do it. So all I'm going to do now, just to quickly change up, you know, that was our killing zone down there before. I want it here now. So all I do, I've just got 3 balls there. I'm just going to drop them in there, and I'm going to start the process again. Now those are going down much quicker. Those are going to hit the bottom there. You know, I don't know what the angle is, Tom. I'm not that clever, as you know, but those are going to come down at a much steeper angle, create our killing zone or hot spot or whatever we're going to call it.
Sweet spot. What's the sweet spot?
You got a sweet spot.
I like a sweet spot.
Yeah, I'm a bit more animalistic, I think, at killing zone. You know what I mean? I want to kill the. No, I don't want to kill the fish. But anyway, so that's our. So we're you know, we're manoeuvring these fish around, and then what I would hope is, and the way this session is going to evolve, is we're going to start on a long whip, on a like 8-metre whip, and then I'm going to try and get them closer. By sort of feeding in a different spot, and we can move these fish where we want them. The only difference on this one, I say we put the soil in there. I put a little bit of chopped worm in there as well, because we were getting a few bleak, but I think, you know, worms are just a nice attractor anyway to have in the ground bait, and we might just be able to slip a piece of worm on and maybe pick out a bigger fish. Who knows? Maybe I'm being a bit hopeful. But,
get in there and catch us one. Go on. Let's have a little look.
So go on.
No, after you. Go on. Age before beauty.
Oh. So, but on this one, we're going to start, you know, out in the flow a bit more. So I've got quite a big float. I've got actually a flat float on here, a 10 gram Creluso Ray, and this is going to enable me just to inch it through a bit slower. Yeah. And again, same as with the Bolo, the key is getting your hook bait running over top of your ground bait. You know, making sure your rig is in position. So these flat floats don't quite work so well putting the lead upstream. You know, you are generally lowering in, but you've still got to adjust accordingly. So now I'm going to be lowering my rig slightly up above me, but most importantly, I'm going to follow that bulk down. So as I know that once it gets down, my bait's fishing right over top of my ground bait. So I'm just going to lower it in there, and then all I do is just follow it down, right down. So I know now it's a big shot. Just let the float sink under, and then you just pull it up and just follow it through, nice and steady.
Poetry in motion.
And it's actually as easy as that, Tom.
It's not as easy as you make it look, Dave. I'm not having it.
It isn't. What we got there?
Foul look days.
Foul look days. Now, if they're not getting stuck into the bait, I don't know what is.
Anybody can hook them in the mouth, folks. Anybody. Right.
Good, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we're not talking about the whip yet. Our next subject is, of course, the Bait-Tech ground bait and the Bait-Tech Pro Natural range of ground baits, to be specific. Now, as you say, we're bending the rules on this one a little bit, because you are actually a Bait-Tech angler, and we did say, didn't we, from word go, we said we'll just do tackle, not bait, and then it doesn't conflict with your Bait-Tech deal. But we've had a few bait companies ask us if we want to work with them, so it seems daft not to. And we've also had a few viewers who've come. Oh, look at that! Oh, what happened there? A few viewers comment, and they've sort of said they'd like to know our thoughts on different baits. So I think this is a good place to start, really, Dave, because although obviously you are sponsored by Bait-Tech, this ground bait is one that you've actually specifically had a hand in developing. So you're not so much a sponsored angler on this one as a consultant, really, and the man who helped develop it. Yeah, so when I joined Bait-Tech quite a while ago now, there wasn't actually, I mean, they had this great range of fish meal ground baits, you know, all the carp stuff and everything was there in place, but the naturals range wasn't really there. And I sort of, you know, obviously started and you know, indicated that it was something that we needed. And shortly after, Dave Harrell joined the team. Yeah. And obviously Dave being a natural venue angler and fished here a lot, we you know, started the process of how we get a mix for, you know, with this river in mind, but something that, you know, would translate to all venues, all river venues. And as such, the Pro Natural project was born, and we had the initial, you know, the prototypes, if you like, or whatever, that, you know, the testing products. And there's a lot of, you know, in all fairness, I mean, a lot of people don't know the story of Bait-Tech, but, you know, ultimately it came about from, you know, a guru in Peter Clapperton, you know, who was, you know, was probably one of the original sort of importers of ground bait to this country, you know, of continental ground baits then. Yeah. And look at that. That's a chub, that one.
That's a chub, that one. Oh. I'm not just a one species man, Tom.
You're not, are you? Multifaceted. That's what you are.
But you see how quickly we've turned these fish into, we've moved them into position.
And actually catching them a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently.
So this is what we're about really. But anyway, so Peter Clapperton was involved with it, but there's a lot of clever guys there as well who understand ground bait, and what they were doing was sending us these different products, and we'd sort of like used them, and it didn't take many attempts, but we used them and sort of said, well, actually, I think it feels like it needs more hemp in it, or it needs to be a bit heavier, and and they did their magic with whatever ingredients they use, and ultimately Pro Natural was born, and we had a mix pretty much straight away that was catching fish. We all caught fish on it, didn't have any. Really just once it was invented, it was there.
Yeah.
All that's happened since then is the range of Pro Natural has evolved.
Yeah.
So they put in a dark one, a darker mix, Pro Natural dark, a fine lake, much finer for your canals and your drains and that sort of thing. A bream mix, dark, and just how these ranges evolved. And so the mix we're using today is the Pro Natural Extra, which again was bought with a bit of, with this sort of venue in mind, where you need to carry a lot of loose offerings in your ground bait, real goody balls, of, casters, hemp, worms, but also that's something that's got the weight to get down so it doesn't break down on the way down. And that's the sort of mix that enables us to fish like we did this morning. There's not many ground baits you could fish with like that, without adding soil and get the results that we get. So it's really, it's been designed with a thought process. But the mix we use today, we actually mixed a bag of the bream with it. Which is maybe not, goes against. There's no bream in here, very few. But it's just, again, it's got a real sweet smell. You mentioned it's that brazim smell. That it's a familiar flavour, isn't it? And it basically. It just works on here. It was someone else who put me onto it. I'd never sort of experimented with it. I was using the Pro Natural Extra, just 2 bags, that was enough for me. But I certainly like it, and I found that the roach like it as well. When the roach are switched on, they love sitting over that bit of sweetness as well. So that's how Pro Natural came about. Yes, like you say, I'm involved with bait tech, and it doesn't sort of goes against the grain of this project really. So I was sort of more interested really to I let you mix it up, didn't I?
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to know what you think. And I know you're not gonna. I don't think you're a man that would sort of disparage something that I've had a hand in, Tom. But if you want to, now's your chance.
Well, right. So let me start with a clean slate.
Incidentally, I'm going to carry on bagging up.
You might as well. You're having a great time, aren't you?
So
obviously, before today, I've never fished with this bait tech ground bait. I can't think of an occasion when I've used it. And I do a lot of natural venue fishing, a lot. And I talk to a lot of natural venue anglers. And I don't actually know anybody, Dave, other than you and Dave Harrell, who actually uses this ground bait, to be honest. Which is interesting in itself, because I think that tells you that it's potentially got a long way to go in terms of conquering the market, which could be a very good thing for bait tech. But I mean, on the circuits that I fish, Census ground bait seem to dominate. Vandenine's very popular. And I know it's not just baits that do this, but bait and tackle can be quite regional, can't it? And I'd imagine if I fished the 7, for example, or the Y, I'd probably see a lot more bait tech stuff and be more inclined to use it myself. So it's something I feel is potentially underused. Then onto the actual mixing, because obviously you asked me to mix it up this morning. And I have seen it before, I've looked at it on the bank when you've been using it and always thought it looks a nice mix. And it was interesting. As often happens with ground baits from all manufacturers, the bags you gave me had actually settled a little bit, and you could actually see quite a lot of crushed hemp in there towards the bottom of the bag, which was nice. When I ran my hands through it, the thing that impressed me straight away was the consistency of it. It's very, very finely, not finely ground, but consistently ground is what I'm trying to say. So, the particles are all of a similar size. There's no big lumps or chunks of biscuit in there like you get from some manufacturers. So in that sense, it seemed a really high quality mix. But what I was particularly looking for when I mixed it up was how it absorbed the water, and most importantly, how, when you squeezed it, it reacted. Because one criticism I've had of every company, to be honest, who's tried to conquer the natural ground baits market, from what I've seen, is they seem to put out a very bready mix. And if you look at your established brands like Census, and Van den Eyne, who we mentioned earlier, you know, for your traditional river ground baits, you want something that when you squeeze it, it goes into a ball. You can actually, you know, concentrate it into a compact ball, feed it, it's going to go down. Now, a lot of other natural and inverted commas mixers that I've seen haven't had that. They've been bready, you've squeezed them, they've been a little bit, I don't know how I can describe it, a little bit like you'd expect a commercial fish meal mix to behave, a little bit softer, a little bit more squidgy. But that's not the case with this. It makes a lovely ball when you've squeezed it. I sort of mixed it quite sparingly to start with so I could squeeze it into little hard balls, and then obviously we added a bit more water until it was right to fish with. And as I said, from looking at what's in it, looking at the dry mix, mixing it and making it into balls, I must say I was really, really impressed. And all that remained really then was to fish with it and catch some fish, and certainly doing that, isn't it?
Do you regularly squeeze hard little balls?
There's nothing I love more, especially on a Friday afternoon like this, Dave, than running my hand through a pair of nicely squeezed balls.
No, so I think it's worth pointing out, you know, I say you know, I've got quite an affinity with bait tech. You know, I've been with them a long time now, and so. But I always like the story of bait tech, the fact that I say it was Pete Clapperton who you know, sort of started the project off.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're where they are in the market, and like you say, there's some giants out there, Census being the one, you know, and at one stage, and you know, it's maybe find out is, you know, sort of evened up a bit more, but at one stage I would say you would come here on a match, and 80% of the anglers would be using Census. Yeah. I don't think that's, I'm guessing at a figure, but I don't think I'm far off with that.
No.
You know, and I am seeing that changing now. I'm not, you know, that's not doing Census down or anything. I'm just saying that there are, you know, what I think what we need to get away from, and I think we've discussed this before, is let's not get carried away that this is some sort of revolutionary magic.
No.
You know, oh, I've got the right bait now, I can't fail. You know, it's not about that, is it? It's about using a bait that's going to deliver what you want, which is, you know, deliver a parcel of bait to the bottom, react the way you want in the water, mix up the way you want it to mix up. It's not a magic formula.
No, is it? Heck?
It's just it's produced by people who understand. I mean, one of the guys at Bait Tech, Graham Barry. I don't know whether you know Graham, but
I know Graham. Well, I know
everybody
Graham.
knows Graham,
Yeah.
don't they? And he's just a legend, and he has a lot to do with it as well. When we were doing it, you know, just people like that who just understand ground bait.
He's in a different stratosphere, that bloke. You see that video in the tackle shop?
Yes. he's you know, people like that. But the point I was going to make is that, you know, this is a company that's, you know, sort of come a long way in a relatively short space of time, but yet they've never had, you know, a lot of the big bait manufacturers are backed by big companies, big corporate companies, and Bait Tech never has been. And the fact that they've ever even competed in that market as they are is quite a thing. But in the last couple of years, they've sort of not amalgamated, I don't know what the word is, I wouldn't say been taken over, but then they're involved with Donald Cook now. Donald Cook are their parent company, if you like.
Yeah.
Donald Cook, a lot of people don't know about, but they provide a lot of ingredients for a lot of ground baits throughout Europe. They're a big company, and I think now with that backing, with that extra big, I think now the company is really sort of heading in a direction, you know, and I think the products I'm seeing and the talk for the future is very encouraging, and it's nice to be a part of, if I'm honest. It's really
it's interesting you say it, because as I said before, I think often baits in particular, tackle as well, you know. I'll give an example. As I was growing up, Maver sponsored Barnsley Blacks, so in the Sheffield area there were tons of Maver tackle. You know, recently you don't see quite as much, and maybe Guru have taken their place because they've got a lot of anglers in that area, and it's very, anglers are to a large extent like sheep, aren't they? In that, you know, if you get a brand or a bait that's in vogue, then that can dominate in an area for a while. And sometimes I just think products like this, it'd only take, you know, you coming on the Trent for a season and winning a few matches for Bait Tech maybe to catch on more on there. I don't know.
It must be a very long process to get that foothold in a market, isn't it? The other thing I should say as well, I was talking about Pete Clapperton, you know, Hayley Goldsmith, who took over the running of the company around about the time that I sort of joined Bait Tech.
That's Pete's daughter, isn't it?
It is, yes. But she was, you know, she's a businesswoman. She gave up a very high-profile job, or a very important job in the city, I believe. I don't know the full story, but to take over the running of Bait Tech.
Yeah.
And what she's done with it, you know, she's put her own personal sort of stamp on it.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not a, let's be fair, it's not an easy trade for anyone to sort of break into.
No.
But to you know, and I don't want to go into a sort of another argument, an ethical argument, but you know, as a woman as well in the angling trade, it's not any woman doing anything in the angling trade. It's not easy, is it?
No.
And the way she's handled it, I think, has been, you know, it's been nice to watch to see how successful where she's taken it to, if you like. And
she's a lovely woman as well. I've had a couple of conversations with her in the past at the Riverfest final and one or two other places, and she's lovely.
No.
But what is the proof in the pudding? It has to be said is you're absolutely slaying these days now over the top of this ground bait.
You need to have a go now, don't you,
I
Tom?
do really.
Even
actually.
I'm not that greedy to let you not have that go. Oh, that's creamy. Oh, Tom.
Dave, I must say, you've brought me to my idea of angling heaven here. It's absolutely awesome fishing, isn't it?
The key is now is where was that bite? That bite was exactly where you want it to be, not where the fish want to be, where you want it to be. You are in, as ever, Tom, you are in complete control.
Dave, I'm in complete control, aren't I?
You are.
I am, aren't I?
You are.
Would you call me a dominant force, Dave?
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Oh. No, joking aside, it's lovely fishing. And that ground bait, you know, I know you've added some soil to it, but I had a good feel when we were fishing the Bolo. And the thing I liked about it is, you know, as I said, you can squeeze it, you can really regulate that that consistency as much as you want by how firmly you squeeze it.
And I say, we use the word control a lot, but it is that, isn't it? You can control how heavy the ground bait is by adding soil. You can control how much bait's in it by what you add in. You know, it's a ground bait that takes a lot of particle, and you know, you can just do with it what you want. And that for me is, like I say, there are some ground baits that you perhaps can't do that with. You know, that aren't right for this. They might be brilliant for another type of another scenario, but for this venue or this sort of fishing, you know, if you fish a lot of venues that flow, then you've got to have a ground bait that does what this one's doing.
Absolutely. It's very, very good. And it'll be really interesting to see how that journey continues, because I know they've got big plans, you know.
I think they're in a position now to really kick on now, and you know, the fact they've even held their own to this point is not remarkable, but it's a hell of an achievement. You know?
Yeah.
It's you know, how many just tackle brands, bait companies have you seen come and go in the last 20 years? It's not easy, and they're very well established. They've got good backing now.
I think it's worth saying as well, you know, I might have been a little harsh on them earlier when I said about not sort of seeing so much on my circuit. I'm talking there specifically about natural venue fishing. You know, what I'm not so clued up on, and you might be more clued up, is obviously the commercial side of the range, which I know up our way they've got a lot of anglers who push that stuff very well. So, you know, it's a big brand in terms of products as well, Dave, isn't it? They've got
yeah, it's a good product range. I think as well the commercial products, you know, the fish meal, ground baits, the pellets, all that stuff, that was right very early on. You know, when I joined, that stuff was right. There were some brilliant mixes, and you know, Bait Tech as a stable, if you want to call us, of consultants. We've had Fishermania champions, Park Dean Masters champions, Maver Match This champions.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, you know, it's,
and they've got you as well.
Well,
you know,
as this, you know, every cake's got to have a cherry on the top, hasn't it, Tom?
It's true, mate, isn't it? It's true.
No, it's.
You could also say it's all the chain's only as strong as its weakest link, Dave.
Well, that's true enough, but you had to really search for that negative there, didn't you? Is that you trying to be in control again, Tom?
No,
tread on the downtrodden.
All good fun.
This is awesome to watch. You know, I say I don't even when we're like this now, I'm not even thinking I want to have a go.
Oh, that's pulled out that one. You see that?
I did, yeah. I was like that when I first started.
Were you, mate?
Yeah. I'm not even looking at this thinking I want to have a go now. I just want you to enjoy this, Tom, because I know tomorrow you can't do this. I could come here tomorrow and do this.
Well, I don't know how you find any time to do any work, Dave, this time. I think I'd be...
I try desperately hard not to do any work.
Let's have a little look. Have we got the old maggot over the hook?
That old chestnut.
That old we have.
Yeah, no, I love watching it. It is something a little bit different. I don't think there's any other venue. You know, there's a lot of venues where you can go and get a chuck. You know, some of the fens and places like that. But
yeah,
I think what puts people off here is the flow. You know, you've got to be in control. You know, we're using a lot of different gear, floats and different things. But ultimately, you know, if you were someone who fished reservoirs or big lakes for bream and skimmers, you'd have a range of floats from 4x14s up to 3 grams probably.
Yes.
And this is just the same. Only everything's a little bit bigger.
Absolutely.
And I won't use a 4x14 float.
Shall we talk a little bit about the final product of today's review?
I think we should talk a lot about today's final product.
And that is, well, I would agree with you, because there's a lot to say about it, but I'd also say that it's been silently doing its work for the last 20 minutes or so while we've been talking about groundbait, because it is, of course, the whip that we're fishing with today.
Well, firstly, without carping on, see what I've done there. Another fish joke. Without harping on about the venue, you know, let's be fair, this is a whip venue, isn't it? This is if you talk about whip fishing, long whip fishing, this is probably the first one that comes to mind, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So this is as good a place as any to bring these things to trial. So we've got the CP200 whips. We've got with us today the 6 metre version and the 9 metre version. So I've not used these before today, and I'll be honest, when I first saw that Cadence were bringing out a whip, and I saw a few being used, and I never really paid too much attention. I was happy with what I was using, but I did sort of not dismiss it, but just looked at it and thought, oh well, it's another whip on the market. You know, it won't be as good as the top of the range ones that everyone goes on about or wants to says are the bee's knees and that, and was perhaps too dismissive of it. But having used one and also having the conversations with James Robbins, I had a real good conversation with him about it, and what I've realised now is just how much that guy knows about fishing rods, carbon, whatever you want to do, and listening to the project of getting these whips to market and what he wanted and what he felt they needed was absolutely fascinating. The idea behind a 9 metre whip, which I'll go into in a bit more detail. But I mean, firstly, what are your impressions?
Well, it's absolutely stunning, isn't it, really? I've got a tournament whip, one of the old ones, so that's what my first point of comparison would be when it comes to this, really. Obviously you compare it to what you're used to fishing with, and I'd say it's every bit as good as that. The response is really crisp. It's not at all floppy, is it, or anything like that. And I mean, obviously the proof of any pudding like this is in the testing. I've not heard of any of these whips breaking. I know quite a lot of anglers who've got one, but that's the only potential thing that's the only potential negative that could be wrong with it, and it's just not something you hear of, is it, these whips breaking? So
no, I haven't seen that, and I also know that just to explain the setup we've got today, we're fishing with a grey hydro in there through one section, which is just the perfect sort of balance for this sort of fishing. You're pulling a 10 gram float up through the water with a dace on the end. You need something substantial. Yeah. So if you put a heavy elastic like that into a lot of whips or short poles or whatever, you can feel the extra weight of that elastic. And it makes it sort of unbalanced at the end. So I would say something, it stands up to that well. But what I also know is, like James himself, I've seen him do it many times, he prefers to fish a flick tip on here. Now many won't do that because there was a danger you're going to hook into a big chub or a barb or a big perch and they feel that thing. But I've seen James land big chub, and I know he's landed barbel on these as well, but I've seen him land big chub on them with a flick tip. So I think the strength thing isn't even an issue, and it doesn't feel like a weak pole in any strength.
No, it's certainly not a weak pole.
What got me was the conversation I had with James, and it really opened my eyes, and he gave me a lot of information about how whips are made and stuff, and it's information that I'm going to pass off as my own and tell people about because it was fascinating. But
that's what you do, Dave, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know what I mean?
I'm being bleak now. I was a bleak. Did you see that? Cunning.
Only you could find a bleak on a 10-gram flat float.
I know. Definitely held me up there, though.
But yeah, so what you're saying is, so with this pole, this is a 9-metre whip, okay? So there's no extensions to take it up to 7 metres because, as you rightly said, if you do that, it's rubbish. Why would you do it? But this is a 9-metre whip that is perfectly workable at 9 metres. It doesn't go off, get to 8 and then gets a bit floppy in that. As you're using it today, we're at 8 metres because if we fish 9 metres today, it would be too far out. There's too much flow on. But if you're fishing at 8 metres, if you put the 9-metre section on, it doesn't lose any of its performance. No. It doesn't flop off or anything like that. A lot of whips on the market are sort of like 7 metres, and you can buy an extension to make it to 8, and it does that. It goes off, and they're short section whip. These are longer section whip. You know, the 1 metre section whips can be, quite, they can sort of, the performance can drop as they get anything above 6 metres. But importantly, and this is the bit that got me, is these whips, the top 5 is telescopic. And James said to me, he said, if you look at all the Italian, the Italians are the, as we found with the Bolo rods earlier, they're the whip specialists, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the majority of Italian manufactured whips are all telescopic. And it's because you don't lose the performance. It's because you keep the blank is narrower throughout. And so what the thinking behind the design of these whips is that you keep, for 5 metres of the whip, or whatever length that top 5 is, you keep that sort of level of performance. And then by adding the sections to take it longer, you're just adding a bit of a, it's a support set, it's a sort of a control centre almost, where you've got that rigidity to control the rest of it, but the whole pole doesn't flop off, because once a telescopic pole goes above sort of 5-6 metres, then they have a tendency to lose their performance. It's kind of like mix the two.
Yes.
The two to come up with a product that's right for the English market, or the UK market, or that's sort of what we do. And I kind of got it, you know what I mean? Yeah. I kind of got what the thinking was. It wasn't, I felt, when I look back to how I dismissed them originally, I felt a bit stupid. because it's just not, you can just see there's a proper thought process gone into how they're manufactured and how they're thought about.
Look, there's no doubt in my mind every Cadence product we've tested has been great quality. And the same can actually be said for every company we're working with product-wise today. But I've got so much respect for the Cadence stable of anglers, of our brand ambassadors, as James calls them, up our way. Anglers like Steve Whitfield. Now, Steve, he loves his whip fishing. He's famous for his whip fishing.
Whip and Bolo, he's the man, isn't
he? He's a top guy, He's a daddy at that kind of fishing.
The daddy, yeah, the daddy, the original daddy.
So if he's sort of on these, then that's good enough for me. It's just sublime fishing, though, Dave, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to move to Hereford, I think, folks. Fancy a house swap? Fancy moving up north?
I couldn't afford your
chub
5-bedroom mansion.
5-bedroom mansion. Look at that. Chevin.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, isn't it? But like I say, you've got to look at what you're using, and the reality is on matches on this river, you could be doing this for 5 hours. You could get those fish in pole range, on whip range, and then you're straight into them on this, and you've got to do this for 5 hours. It's certainly a product you could do that with, isn't it?
One question I would like to ask you. Obviously, we're fishing this whip. It's 7.5 metres here as we've got it on the section. It does go to 9 metres, we've said, and there's a half extension available as well. But you said James obviously leaves a flick tip in, which would make sense to me. I tend to fish with flick tips quite a lot, but obviously, as I've said, I don't really do an awful lot of this sort of fishing. Why do you elasticate a tip? What's the thinking behind that?
I just think in these scenarios, having that cushion, especially on the strike, it's nice. It's nice to strike hard, isn't it? I've find that, you know, wye fish in particular, you know, you want to strike hard and really, you know, set your hooks. And I think if you use a flick tip, so there is a sort of a breaking point on a flick tip, isn't there? The fact that, you know, it will reach a point where it stops bending.
Yes.
Whereas elastic tend to take the stretch, you know, it takes a long time to reach the bottom of its stretch.
Yes.
So it's just that extra safety buffer. But what I will say is elastication, if you're going to use elastic, it's got to be right.
Yeah.
Because it can just go fishing like this, it can go horribly wrong if you've got your elastic too slack, you know, and you're trying to swing a
fish
6-ounce day, you know, like you've got fish slapping around your ears and all kinds of rubbish going on. So it's got to be right, and that's why, you know, these hollow elastics are actually perfect for it. If you think of the idea of a hollow elastic where the walls collapse as it the bend. As it comes out the pole tip and there's an angle, once you put an angle in it, then the two walls rub together and it almost locks off.
Yes.
And that's why hollow elastics, for me, have always been ideal for swinging. That said, I still use quite a lot of latex for my dace fishing, but I just like having that security of an elastic. And like I say, you know, there's plenty of big fish being landed on a flick tip. It's just personal preference, isn't it, I suppose?
Absolutely. It's
how northern you are.
Well, this is true, yeah. I don't like paying for elastic, so a flick tip sounds a great
That's what it
option
is.
to me.
That's why you've always used a flick tip, you tight ass.
No, seriously, Dave, this is, well, I'm blown away by the moment, as you can tell. The fishing's amazing, but this whip is great, isn't it? I mean, it's doing everything we ask of it. We're fishing it at long lengths there.
Yeah, I think just going on to the buttocks, the dolly butt, if you like, it's a reversible. So like on the poles, you can use it on the 8 metre section or the 7 metre section. And what it does, it's a little bit sort of tougher, if you like. So if you want to if you're using it at this length now and you just want that extra security under your elbow, you know, because this is taking a lot of hammer, this part of the pole, isn't it, when you're swinging,
yes,
you know, hundreds of times a session. So it gives that extra bit of security there, but it also buys back that ½ metre or whatever it is. When you take the flick tip out, it buys back that length that you've lost there. Good catch.
You like that?
Yeah, that's quite nice. That actually brushed your head as it went forward. It was quite clever.
Totally accidental.
Yeah, no. So that's the dolly butt, and that comes as standard with the pole. That does. That's with the 9 metre whip. That one comes as standard.
Well, Dave, as much as I would love to sit here doing this all day, all weekend, to be honest, it's just the most amazing fishing. I think that the people out there would probably rather see you having a go on the whip than me. They'd rather see a master at work than the apprentice. You know what I mean? So
I couldn't agree more.
I'm gonna make this my last dace. And then you're going to have a go at a shorter length, aren't you?
We're going to do some manipulation again, Tom. We're going to manipulate these fish shorter, and we're going to fish short whip and see if we can keep the catch rate up.
Sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm just going to catch one more.
I was going to say, just with this one famous one more.
Yeah, this one
famous
more.
Last cast.
One more, and then we can do that. And also we can have a little look in the bag, because you've left the bag at the top there. I understand there's something quite special in there, isn't there, for a discussion?
Well, quite valuable. Something quite shiny and valuable.
Shiny and valuable. I mean, normally, obviously, we'd do this up the bank, but it just doesn't seem
want to stop.
appropriate.
We don't want to take a break today, do you? You're enjoying yourself too much.
We don't want to. Yeah, I feel like surely you'd much rather see us, or see Dave bagging up on the whip while we're doing what's in the bag than stood at the top of the bank. So we'll do it as we're fishing for a change. Rules are there to be broken, aren't they, Dave?
They are. And we're making the rules.
Oh, how did I miss that?
Is a question that has bugged me for a long time.
I reckon it sent me a text, that one, didn't it?
Your feeding's good, Tom.
Did you like that? You're impressed?
I like you got into a nice rhythm. This is the thing about people talk about speed fishing. They think about catching weights of fish on whip. It's speed. You've got to be fast. It's not. It's rhythm. Rhythm is what catches. Rhythm equals speed, Tom.
So all just a question of rhythm and tackle. No. No, I got it wrong. It's all just a question of a rhythm and speed. It's all just a question of balancing your tackle, your ground bait casters, maggots and your catapult.
It worries me that you know that off by heart.
Bit of bob. Right, we'll put this down. It's your turn, love. And we'll have a look what's in the bag.
What's in the bag?
Right, Dave. Very nice looking bag this week.
Elvis the King's back.
And inside it, a golden ticket. You care to elaborate?
Okay, Tom, so the golden ticket. The golden ticket in fishing terms is regarding big money qualifiers then. Okay, so we are, you know, you win a big money qualifier, and that gives you the golden ticket to the factory of dreams that is Fishermania, Maver Match this, Golden Reel, you know, winning a life-changing amount of money from winning a fishing match, which is something that's only a few have been fortunate enough to do. I certainly haven't. You haven't. But we've put ourselves in with a chance by qualifying for a few of these big finals. My worry and my question to you is, are we now at a stage where we seem to see there's a lot of events keep cropping up now? So you've got those 3 that I've mentioned, and on top of that there's other, you know, smaller prize funds but still a good prize fund, and different competitions cropping up. I heard when there was a £100,000 one.
Yes, yeah, the Fishing Association.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
so you know, something that I've not entered myself, or you know, but you know, it's these things are cropping up, and my worry is, are we in danger of fragmenting our big match fishing to the point where these events then become undersubscribed because there's just not enough anglers who are prepared to spend that amount of money on a ticket, £50 on a lot of them, on a ticket to back themselves to qualify for a big money final. And you know, are we actually, by having more of these events, damaging ourselves? And is there a different future for angling with regards to matches? It's like, you know, like you look at other sports like snooker or golf that have tours and a professional body and, you know, organisation. Is there ever a way that angling can go that way? Would that be a bad thing if angling went that way? And just where is match fishing going?
Brilliant question. Brilliant question.
Thank you, Tom.
So, right, first part of the answer. Very complicated answer, Dave. Sorry. Very
Complicated question, Tom.
Complicated question, complicated answer. First things first, right, I think we are in a great position, a position that I never thought match fishing would be in my lifetime, to be honest. But a position at the minute where we've got a lot of new anglers coming into the sport. Thanks to COVID. COVID has reset everybody's thinking, and it's made a lot of people who've never fished before try fishing. And it's made a lot of people who might have fished once or twice get a lot more into it because there's not been a lot else that they can do. So that might well provide a lot of new blood for all these competitions. I think it probably will. I think we'll see record entry this year into a lot of match fishing type events, which is great. So in that sense, we might get a false reading this year, in that I do feel that a lot of events will do very, very well. Is there too many match fishing events, and is it too fragmented? I think it is, and I think there are. And I think if we're not careful, we stand the danger of the sport being so fragmented and so divided that... roach or dace?
It's a dace, Tom.
Dace, that one. We stand the chance of being that fragmented that, unfortunately, when it does start to decline, we've not got the centralised force managing it to keep it going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I don't see how. There's just fishing is just too far widespread to ever have that sort of centralisation or governance, if that's the right word. I'd love to think that angling could go in the direction of a Golf European Tour or something like that, and see, you know, what you got to remember as well is some of these guys who we fish against week in, week out now, they have put as much time and dedication into angling as to a professional golfer, someone who's now getting paid, even if they're not winning at the top level regularly, they are still getting paid handsomely for their efforts. They see reward. Yeah. Unless you're winning a Fishermania or you know, sponsored by a tackle firm that's paying you a good wage each year, you're not really, these guys, there's people who are, you know, basically working as amateurs but putting the same effort in as a professional. Yeah. And what I'd like to see at some point in the future is I'd like to see those guys have a chance of actually making a living from it, however long that is, but actually going out. And if you look at America, if you look at bass fishing, you know, it's all right, in a very sort of Hollywood way, it's worked. People make a lot of money from bass tournaments and things like that. And as much as course fishing can never be like that, there must be a marketing way, there must be a way that we can get to a professional level like that. And I'm not, and I don't know whether that would be a good thing for angling or not, but what I see is a lot of people with a lot of dedication and a lot of work into angling and not really getting the reward they deserve.
Absolutely not. But this is the issue, isn't it? And we're seeing it all over fishing, from international fishing, where we've got a new category in the world champs, the freestyle feeder, which will involve method feeders and things. So even international fishing is fragmenting. Like, I'm 34 now. When I was 18, I'm pretty sure that there was only the under 20 or under 18 world champs for men. There might have been a younger category like under 16, or there was a ladies, I think. I don't even know whether there was a disabled world champ, but there was basically about 4 categories. Now, there's loads of categories. There's about 3 age groups under the age of 25. There's two veterans categories, plus ladies, plus disabled, plus all these other feeder fishing events that have sprung up. So if we're taking the international scene to be the top level of match fishing, the thing we aspire to, the same thing's happening there, Dave. It's fragmenting all the time, there's more categories. And the thing that I worry about is, I just feel like there ought to be a few things, or 1 or 2 things, that everybody or most anglers aspire to win. If you could get to that point, then you could monetize it and make it professional much more easily, because the sponsorship route would be quite clear. If everybody wanted to win a certain thing, then obviously you can monetize that really well. By having it so fragmented, I just worry that there's too much for people to go at, and there's, how many champions do we have a year now? We have a Riverfest, Feeder Masters, Feeder King, Golden Reel, Match This, Fishermania. Like, you could probably list off 15 or 20 different events that have got their own champion who, as you say, has done very well to win a match. But would it be better if it was like, I don't know, darts or things where there's a world championship and then other local events? I don't know.
And maybe a ranking tournaments, so that people, like, to get into a world championship, you have to score so many points and things like that. That's the way you get to it. It's light years away. Light years away,
it is.
But all I'm saying is I think the international scene now is kind of, seems to be far removed from general fishing in the sense that it's quite, only a few people are prepared to put in the dedication to get to that level. Who can, and because you mentioned the youth systems, and only so many people have got the opportunity or the time to put in to get into going through that ladder, and ultimately there's only literally a handful who will ever make it. So I don't see young anglers now. You were saying about young anglers coming into the sport. I would say there's more anglers coming into the sport aspiring to be like Jamie Hughes, Andrew Bennett, than being, John Desk or Alan Scotthorne, or
Totally agree with you.
Totally. And that's nothing. That's nothing. And that's not fair on them, because what they've achieved in angling is brilliant. But the reality is that's not going to be most of us. Most of us are never going to be anywhere near that, or get anywhere near that, or try to get anywhere near that.
It's an interesting one, Dave. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to come up with the answers today, but...
Okay. Well, tell me this then. What are your plans for this year ahead? Because it looks, Tom, and I don't like to speak too soon, but the sun is shining, spring has sprung, there's a new future out there, all this rubbish we've been through the last 12 months, we feel like there's hope on the horizon.
There is.
What are your plans? What are you going to do?
I'm going to have a crack this year at Riverfest qualifiers.
Good man.
I've already ever fished one Riverfest qualifier, and that was last year on the tidal Trent, and I had £10.8 and £10.12, I think, qualified. I was very, very annoyed, Dave.
But hang on, if you qualify for Riverfest, who's going to film it?
Wow, the great-looking guy at the back of the camera now. He's
Jack.
Very handsome young man.
Could Jack handle it on his own, though, without your creative direction?
I think Jack could probably do a better job, which is quite worrying, really. But anyway, we'll not go into that for now.
So you're having a go at Riverfest.
I'm having a go at Riverfest, yeah. And then the other one I might have a go at is Fishermania, just because I had the honour of sitting behind Jordan Holloway a couple of years ago in the final, and I absolutely loved it. And again, I've not done loads of qualifiers for Fisher in the past. I've hardly ever really entered many qualifiers, so I'd really enjoy that.
Fishermania is a complete unique angling experience. Like we were saying about all these other big money finals, ultimately Fishermania is a TV show, and it's just that's why I say it's I could look back at it with regret or disappointment at the finals I've been in, but I love them because it was such an experience, and the buzz it gives you when you qualify right through to the build up to the final itself is far better than the end result isn't what you want. But it's worth it, and I look back, and although I won't accept that those finals, which were kind of a non-existence, will be the highlight of my fishing career, I don't want to accept that. They massively were.
Awesome.
And I want to get back.
Well, Dave, you've been there, and I'd love to think Love to think I could do. And I tell you, next winter, after today, I'm definitely going to be coming back here and having a go at this as well. Right, so there we are. Fantastic dace fishing. Fantastic review on, well, I used 3 fantastics in the same paragraph, I think.
It's just
fantastic review on 3 fantastic products. So let's sum up then, Dave. Thoughts on the rod?
Right, so the Colmic rod, I thought, and I think the problem is with these products is we don't hold enough of these to ever really give them and go, well, it's not the same as that, or it's not as good as that. But I loved using this. You loved using this. It did the job. It was perfect for this. How it would translate to a much finer finesse fishing, I don't know. I feel like it's got a lot of power in it, this rod, and it would be a good bagging rod. As we've seen today, we were bagging on it today. Maybe you might need to go to a finer one, but they've got the different ones in the range. This is the first one we've seen, so I like it. I like the guides. I like this these very slim guides. I've not seen them like that before, so that's all good. It's got a feel of a you know, of an Italian. I'm going Italian again. I can't stop talking about Italians, can I?
You love it, don't you?
I think I want to live in Italy.
Pasta for tea. You love pasta.
Pasta.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I like pasta.
Margarita
I like
pizza. Yeah.
I like pizza.
I don't want that.
I can't stand meatballs either, but that's another story.
It's another story, mate.
Yeah, so I love it. I like Colmic. I love what Colmic are doing. They really are sort of, you know, they're making an effort to be a big brand in this country, and I think this sort of product shows there's certainly a marketplace for their products on this river and this scene, if you like. We didn't talk price point. What price are we talking to these, Tom?
So we'll put that on the bottom of the screen now, but basically, you know, between 120 and 200 quid for the range. That one's the 6 metre. There's a 5, 6 and a 7 metre rod in the range. And they don't break the bank, so
no. And I've used Bolo rods that are a lot more expensive, you know, and you know, I think people try and improve things in a certain way. I know some try and put more rings on them. You know, it's a common problem with Bolo rods with you know, lines sticking to the blank and that. To be honest, it's never a problem on this river because the flow pulls them off. It's not an issue on here. But can I see much difference between that and some of the expensive rods I've held? No, I'd quite happily use that. Yeah, I just
sublime piece of kit.
Yeah, very nice, very and looks nice as well, Tom.
Yeah, I'd say it's stunning. Okay, we'll sum up on the whips then.
Okay, so this, as I say, I was you know, quite blown away by the thinking behind the whips. You've used it. We've used it long. You know, 8 metres, 7.5 metres, absolutely. Just a very balanced piece of kit. Obviously got the strength, perfect for this job. We've just used, I mean, we haven't really done that one justice. We've only used it at 4 metres, but again, you know, just the way it's balanced. This one, the 6 metre one, has got a 3 metre telescopic top 3. So again, it's working on that balance, the idea of the telescopic giving you better performance. So I like that, and I shall be looking out for that. You know, in any whip I use from now on. I'm really keen to compare them, to be honest, to other whips, and I'm going to do that at some point.
Well,
I'm going to get out and have a look.
As I said, I've fished with a tournament whip a fair bit. Whenever I've done this sort of style of fishing, that's what I use, and I can honestly say that's as good as a tournament to me in terms of performance. Whether it's as strong, whether it lasts as well as my tournament whip has, remains to be seen, but I've certainly seen no reason why it won't. Have you?
No, and again, the big point there is, I believe 9 metres comes as standard with just one top, with the top kit, with the flick tip, which you can take out in a lascate, but 9 metres with the dolly butt, 280 quid.
So again, not going to break the bank.
And the shorter one, the 6 metre, is 160 quid. So again, and I should point out as well that Cadence, with these, the same as the poles, they do their same thing where they have, you buy the packet, but you can buy your spares. You can build it to.
And there's an element of interchangeability between whatever length you buy, isn't there?
Yeah,
the top sections don't interchange, but the lower sections do.
Yeah. So the 7.5 and 9.5 and 9 metre section will fit on the 6 metre width.
Yes.
So and the top kits will interchange. Top 3 off that one will change with that one. So there's
it's basically different lengths, isn't it?
Yeah. But you can build it again. Build the package to suit yourself. You can spend more money if you want. You can buy different top kits and what have you. But if you want a basic whip, as it comes at 9 metres, 280 quid or 160 for the 6 metre one, which I think is very, very competitive.
Absolutely. And finally, the Bait Tech ground bait. Now, There's not a lot to say about that other than we've caught a shed load of fish over it. It's performed
Kind of done the job.
really well, and it's certainly done the job. So, should we sign off on that, Dave?
I think so. I think so. Have you enjoyed it, Tom?
Have I enjoyed it? I've absolutely loved it, and
You're going to be pestering me to come again, aren't you?
I'm so hoping we've got another half an hour in us, haven't we?
Do you think the public will get fed up of the review coming from the River Wye at Belmont every time?
Well, we can't go there next time because it's closed season, so we'll have to think of something else. Unless we go salmon fishing. Do a salmon rod.
Yeah, well, yeah. Now you're talking.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed the review, please give us a like, give us a share, and obviously if you're on the YouTube channel, subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. It's worth mentioning as well, if you want to know more about the fishing specifically on the River Wye here, Dave's got his own channel. We don't talk about it much, but he has. Angling Escapades.
Is that a shameless plug?
Get over there, you'll see him catching all manner of fish of all manner of sizes. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.